welcome to what is our final online lecture. I know, weep if the tears come. And if the tears are in happiness, I really can't stop you. But welcome to our final lecture, our last big discussion of the semester. And today we are looking at the final two readings, right? The short speech of Pat Buchanan at the 1992 Republican Convention, and the chapter in Angela Nagel's recently published book, Kill All Normies, Online Culture Wars from 4chan to Tumblr in the Age of Donald Trump. There's a lot of material that is contemporary, and a lot of this material has yet to be really compartmentalized within academic discourse. This lecture, this discussion, this final foray into politics and culture attempts to begin that sorting. But like most of the online lectures that I offer, beyond just simply repeating what you picked out of the readings, I want to place it within the larger series of discussions that we've been having in relation to memory and identity. And I also want to pick up on one of the big topics that we began last week, and that is the unmooring of state-sponsored historical memory, right? The temporary shelf life that historical memory has occasionally, and how they are frequently challenged by pre-existing collective memories from various socio-political, socio-economic, and socio-ideological groups here. So what better way to finish this out than looking at what we have just euphemistically referred to as the online culture wars, right? The rise of a number of alternative forms of political cultural thought, many of them spilling into various forms of political extremism. And while much of what we're talking about today focuses on the new aspects of the political right, sort of the post-paleo-conservative right, the right-wing politics of Donald Trump and Milo Yiannopoulos and Alex Jones and Dinesh D'Souza and Prager University, we cannot and we will not neglect sort of the nascent rise, the nascent emergence of a new political left, largely, though not entirely, situated around the persona and the populism of Bernie Sanders. So, suffice to say, status quo political culture in the United States is, at this point, anything but. And even though the recent presidential election has kind of given people, in my opinion, a false sense of hope that America is quote-unquote back, and that the worst extremities of the Trump years are now going to be buried once again for a Obama-era restoration, I've got some bad news for you. We are not going back to normal. And that is because the majority of Americans do not want to go back to what the mainstream media wants you to believe is normal. I am recording this one day before our penultimate class session, so it is still early December. Trump is still president. Biden has yet to be inaugurated, and we have yet to see what he is really going to do. If Biden does end up becoming somewhat of a surprise candidate that does a number of things to, if not placate, definitely address many pressing issues of the progressive left, I'll be more than happy to eat my own words and, swallow, humble pie, whatever it is, right? But, in light of his constant promises that nothing fundamental will change, that we need moderation, and we need to constantly cater more so to Republican sentiments than left-wing progressive ideas and opinions of people, below the age of 40, I doubt that the 4 years of Biden and Harris are going to really do anything except just exacerbate problems and tensions beneath the surface. So I think that this is a great way of finishing out this class and hopefully giving you enough curiosity and desire to continue this research, continue this discussion with me. If not next semester, then definitely, in the subsequent years that you have as a student at LIU. So, as I've said, this is the start of our last lesson, and we are, concluding what I think has been an enormously successful class, and one that I have been very, very happy in working with you all in, particularly that the majority of you never really knew much about the subject of politics and culture before coming in. But I'm hoping that, even if this class is all that you're going to have with me, and you go back to your pharmacy, your nursing, your biology, or any of those other disciplines, you retain a lot of this information, and you begin to see the world maybe a little bit differently, maybe a bit more empirically than you did back in September. But this last major lesson looks at the studies of emerging and re-emerging collective memories in the age of what I call democratized information, right? So, studies of memory, collective and historical, traditional, studies of print capitalism, they all take place in the early modern era, right? They all take place within the mid to late 19th century, sometimes the early 20th century. And, year after year of teaching this class within poli-sci, there's always one student, and many of you have already asked this already, what is the relationship of historical memory in the age of the internet? And while I never really had an opportunity to address that back when I was teaching this at Rutgers, the truncated schedule that we have now allows us to spend some time, although short, but time enough to think about the rise of and the empowerment of pre-existing alternative collective memories that in an earlier age, before the internet, right, before radio talk shows and online social media, might have gathered, a few dozen followers, based on how far their pamphlets or, maybe their cassette tapes or infomercials went. But in the age of the internet today, conservative talk radio, Facebook pages, YouTube channels, podcasts, alternative sources of information, however it is that you want to call it, both on the left as well as on the right, have exploded. They've just absolutely exploded. And they have continued to grow in the last 4 to 5 years. The defeat of Hillary Clinton in the 2016 presidential election, I think, provided a definitive end to what was beforehand a largely unassailable neoliberal status quo. The 4 years of Donald Trump, many people would want you to believe, are just a 4-year anomaly. And many of them are kind of hoping that a restorative period under Biden and Harris, with Obama and Clinton not that far, away from levers of power, will kind of, bring things back to normal. And, if you're an affluent, wealthy, white suburbanite, sure, why not? You can certainly convince yourself that things are back to normal. But, if you were a white, affluent suburbanite, you didn't really suffer that much under Trump. Your stock portfolio went through the roof. Your property value, continued to increase. Trump made you money, especially if you were a member of the professional managerial class. If you are on the losing end of, neoliberal capitalism, if you find yourself increasingly in debt, not knowing where to go with your degree or what to do in an increasingly formless world, I think that we are certainly going to see the continued spread of various collective memories, sort of the Weimarization of politics in this country. I'm sort of thinking to myself, is apathy and withdrawal going to make us more Filippo Sabetti than Robert Putnam? And I'm thinking, no, not really. I'm looking at the way in which the sort of the cultural, the social, the community vibe is in this country today. And with the democratization of information and the understanding that you can get whatever interpretation of events you want, if you search long enough and find the podcast or the YouTube channel or the chat site that reaffirms your beliefs, I think we're actually more so going to be more like Weimar, Germany, that Sherry Berman talked about. Now, that's not to say that we're going to elect Nazis to power, but, in an era of free speech and everybody needs to have their own opinions addressed and we need to reach across the aisle to both sides, blah, 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 you'd be surprised how much we will placate extremist Republicans and incredibly short-sighted, narrow-focused, Democrats in thinking that this is the way to go and this is what people want. What I'm also talking about, and what I will spend some time explaining to you in this last lecture, is that this is all a phenomenon of what we call market segmentation. Market segmentation is a term that is used within studies of consumerism to explain how commodities, goods and services are being sold to individuals today based not so much on what the product is or does, but what the product helps you identify as, right? What kind of identity, what kind of lifestyle the product sells. And if you're already thinking that this kind of makes sense, good, because I'll be more detailed in a couple of minutes here. And alongside market segmentation comes political segmentation, which is pretty much the exact same thing, except that politics or political rhetoric, political campaigning, is focused less on substantive issues and more on selling the candidate's image and identity, right? Political segmentation is neither political nor market segmentation are new things. I mean, think these things have been going on basically since the 60s. But because of the pervasiveness of identity politics today, and I'm not really a fan of it, but I acknowledge its ubiquitousness, both market and political segmentation, in my opinion, are probably more prominent than they have ever been, especially if this last election was really decided on whether you like Trump or you hate Trump. And, just like in the 2016 election, Trump won not because he was Donald Trump, but because he wasn't Hillary Clinton. In 2020, Joe Biden won not because he's Joe Biden. I mean, the man has no message of his own except that he's not Donald Trump. And, the idea that, Biden may have been, he's an insider, he was Obama's VP, he's the safe and electable candidate. I mean, it won. I was surprised that he won. I have to say that, Trump probably lost a good degree of electability with his inability of handling COVID. But we're stuck with Biden. And when he gets, inaugurated, we'll find out exactly how effective or ineffective he really is. But all of this finishes out, at least for this class, our understanding of the importance of memory and narrative in modern-day socio-political groups and organizations. So we're going from the sort of the official channels of institutionalized memory, right? The print capitalism that defined and shaped the formation of modern-day states, to the unmooring, the decentralization of historical memory in the age of information, the age of the internet, and how a lot of prevailing status quo cultures and identities are, effectively being assailed by new social and socio-political movements, to the point where the culture wars of the United States today has, as you probably have heard, divided the population between right and left, red and blue, conservative, and liberal. So what exactly is market segmentation? This is, one of your big vocab words for this section here. And I am taking the term market segmentation from the book A Consumer's Republic by Elizabeth Cohen. It's a book that I have traditionally assigned, or parts of the book I have assigned for my globalization class. Market segmentation is probably something that you've already understood. You probably already know, but you've just never assigned a term to it. It is the creation of various niches, subcultures, and lifestyles within the market for consumption. So rather than selling a commodity, a physical commodity like a shirt, a pair of pants, shoes, or a car, right? Market segmentation will repackage these previously generic products, but modify them to somehow represent, be symbolic of, or help you attain or retain an identity in certain identities, certain lifestyles, right? The rugged look, the sophisticated look, the so-called California look, the country look, right? It is really a way of selling a product multiple times to a customer, but selling an identity, selling a lifestyle, right? It is selling something to a people who live by a commodity and a brand. And this has actually become really rampant, I would say, in the last 15 or so years, when people, especially women, I have to say, this is not me being politically incorrect here, this is just me being empirically observant, women will shop for and buy accessories, clothing, handbags, sunglasses, watches, jewelry, things like that, that prominently display the logo of the company that is made by it, right? So you've seen, DK or Gucci, or, two of the big ones there, right? And you'll see these women with these handbags, which aren't even handbags anymore. They're largely shopping bags. I mean, these things are just bottomless pits. But you got the big DK circle, on there, which wants, the passerby to know that the carrier of this handbag has money to purchase, right? So it's like if you need to get a handbag, a purse, a pocketbook, depending upon what you call it, right? Yeah, you can go to Walmart, you can go on Amazon, you can find something, anything. I mean, if you really, really wanted to, you could just take a plastic shopping bag from the supermarket and just carry that around. But that kind of makes you look poor and homeless, right? So what you need is a sophisticated, stylish handbag. And you need one that provides a sense of status, that provides a certain image that you want to project. This is market segmentation. So it goes beyond the purchase of an item, but you are purchasing the symbols, the narratives, the meanings that go along with said item. You need a laptop? You can buy a run-of-the-mill PC. But why would you want to do that? You want to impress people. You're going to go and buy a Mac. You need a car. Any four wheels with a steering wheel will get you from point A to point B. But is it fair enough to say that there are cars that are sold on the market today that are less useful as automobiles and more just in visual spectacle, in bling? I mean, Jaguar exists solely and exclusively for the idea that, yes, our cars will spend 275 out of the 365 days of the year, most likely in the shop. We're not the most reliable cars out there, but they're expensive, and they are the vocation of a specific rich clientele. So you will buy a Jaguar, the saying goes, not because you want a reliable car, but because you've got money to burn, right? You can afford the Jaguar as a little car on the side. This was the entire thing in the 60s and 70s for Jaguars. They realize they're losing the market in terms of reliability and quality between the American and the German markets. So the British are like, well, it's a luxury car. And that's it. You are literally spending money on luxury items. And so with this understanding, right, market segmentation is more than just consumerism, but it promotes, it entrenches, it furthers understandings of social, economic, racial, geographic, even gender segmentation, right? The purchase of a good will provide the buyer with a certain identity to fit into some pre-existing group, right? There's luxury buying, there's working class buying. There are goods that are designed for the black community, the Hispanic community, the preppy white community, the skater community, the nerd. There is now an entire line of clothing and accessories that is geared for the nerd culture, right? If you want to look like a dork, a nerd with the big rimmed glasses or whatever it is, this kind of shows, right, how far nerds have gotten. Where, look, I'm old enough to tell you, and the scars still keep me up at night or whatever. There was a time that I was absolutely convinced in the 7th grade, the 6th, 7th grade, I would not survive. I would not make it to the 8th grade, okay? I'm old enough to be like, as a nerd, as a dork, as someone who was socially awkward. I mean, I was picked on, I was, bullied, whatever it is. Today, as a nerd, you're kind of cool. You don't even have to be smart. You can be a complete idiot, but look and dress like a nerd, and apparently that's not even cool. In some cases, that's even sexy, right? So you will buy into a certain lifestyle, a certain style of fashion, which on one level provides a certain degree of heterogeneity between the segments, between the fashions, right? Go to your local shopping mall. Go to the clothing stores, right? Not all the clothing stores are the same. Some of them have clothes and accessories that are geared towards a certain fashion, a certain fad, a certain identity, right? And then if you don't like that, you can go to another store. So there's like multiple varieties of choice. But here's the neat thing about market segmentation. Within each choice, there is a clear homogenizing conformity that goes into it. Right? So you want to say, all right, I'm going to dress grungy. Okay, so there are certain clothes that you can wear, but in order for you to identify as grunge, you have to conform to those clothes. You want to dress like a metalhead, you have to wear certain clothes. You want to dress as a goth, you have to wear certain clothes. You also have to listen to certain music. You have to have certain hairstyles. You have to read certain books. You have to keep certain friends in that sense. So market segmentation, while it does promote a sense of structured and created diversity, within each of those segments is a very homogenizing, unifying, conformity-driven sense of identity, which is kind of lost on the consumer, whether it's an actual purchasing consumer or just a passive consumer. But it's the idea that it allows the individual to express their own thoughts and identities freely, even though they're buying into a prefabricated lifestyle. From the market's point of view, okay, this has one major goal: the increase of sales of the same item, just in different variants, while consolidating choice and preference. So from a marketing standpoint, people are going to buy the same product over and over again, especially if fashions change. But the consumer thinks that they are, just catering to their own beliefs, their own fashions, their own identities. No, this is sold to them in catalogs every year, seasonal catalogs, whether it happens to be social media, peer pressure, music that comes out. You want to identify with one thing or another, you're going to have to conform to certain things. So it's a type of managed diversity, both managed diversity and managed identity within a consumer-driven market that is operated through a concept of target marketing, right? Target marketing in the idea that we are going to create an identity within this line of clothes, within this element of music, within this supply of furniture or food or whatever it is, right? And we are not going for the whole audience, right? We don't want the whole audience, but we want to attract a certain clientele that we think will come into our stores. And if the fashion is popular enough, if it's pervasive enough, we might even create a potential customer who a day, a week, a month earlier would never have thought of that. But they want to fit in, they want to be part of it, and suddenly they're buying into the narratives, the symbols, the commodities, right? So target marketing allows for the diversification of a product alongside the simultaneous image design by the customer. Right? So it is very, very, very much a type of deliberate print capitalism, but a print capitalism that part of its core code identifies diversity. But within that diversity, there is no difference in the degree of codification and standardization. So you thought that print capitalism was going to go away. Oh no, there are many, many print capitalisms in this world today, right? I mean, what kind of target marketing do we have here? All of us have been susceptible to this at an early age. Some of the best customers out there are children, right? The toy market, the breakfast cereal market, the Happy Meals, the fast foods. If you had a happy and successful childhood growing up, your parents took you to McDonald's, maybe once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks or whatever it was. But I remember as a kid growing up in suburban New Jersey, if we went to McDonald's, that was like a victory. That was like the poor man's Disney World, As a kid, you get your Happy Meal, you get your, Big Mac, you get to play in the ball pit, it's all sorts of great stuff. And what comes along with Happy Meals? promotional tie-ins with toys and drinking cups and little plastic, figurines and, this, that, the other thing, right? And you do this because you want to fit in. It's being, hip. As a kid, you want to go to McDonald's. Everyone goes to McDonald's. You want to be that kid whose parents took them to McDonald's that day so you can brag to your friends the next day that you went there. Or better, you had a birthday party at McDonald's. I know this sounds kind of weird, but back in the day, if you couldn't afford Disney World, hey, if your McDonald's in your town had a playground, even better. But beyond, selling to children, I'm sure, go to the store, go to Wegmans, go to Trader Joe's. Even better, go to Trader Joe's, go to Whole Foods. What do they sell? Lifestyle branding, right? Especially with things like Trader Joe's and Whole Foods. I mean, they are jacking the price up of otherwise ordinary, elementary items, but they're selling a certain sense of life. They're selling a degree of affluence, of wokeness, of environmental consciousness. You don't even know if the product does anything, but you feel good walking out of a Trader Joe's, much better than walking out of a Walmart or a Target or a CVS or a Duane Reade, right? And, take a look at the way in which certain products, whether they're clothing or consumable items, are designed today, right? Gay-friendly, non-binary, gluten-free, artisanal, vegan mac and cheese stores. I mean, the area around LIU is becoming replete with that. Go to the DeKalb market. The food there is good. It's unbelievably expensive. But if you're a vegan going there, you're in good shape. If you're a carnivore, you're in good shape as well. But don't expect plebeian food, right? If you want cheap plebeian food, yeah, I mean, you've got, Junior's across the street, or better yet, you got Two Brothers, which is a great pizzeria, right? But the idea that these new, hip, environmentally conscious, gender fluid, sensitive commodities are now out there on the market, it's going to want to attract people, or in some cases repel people, to buy or not buy their products, right? Especially if it can come in some neat little story, the vegan mac and cheese place is in a former crayon factory, right? Or the micro craft beer that we're drinking comes out of an old recrafted World War II era building in the Brooklyn Navy Yards, right? It's hip. It's unique. It's got kind of like a working class background to it, but trust me, all blue collar elements have been safely taken out. And target marketing is also very specific in not just attracting certain people, but repelling others. So people who are like, oh, I'm not going to go into that gay-friendly artisanal cupcake store. Well, then the store is like, great, we don't want your business. We don't want to serve to racists. We don't want to serve to bigots. We don't want to serve to, transphobes or whatever it is, right? Our customers are woke, they're young, they're gender fluid, they're tattooed, they probably have a thoroughly built Tumblr account, and that's the kind of people that we want. By the way, look us up on Instagram and look at all the selfies that we have. Isn't that cool, right? So target marketing deliberately creates market classes, right? And it will create identities within consumerism that you probably didn't think existed beforehand, right? The black market, not the, the African-American market, not the, fell off the truck market, right? Soccer moms, NASCAR dads, yuppies, hippies, hipsters, urban cowboys, material girls, FUBU, right? For us, by us. High yellow. Let's say you're white and you want to dress up in ghetto urban black culture. You're high yellow. LOHAS, one of my personal favorites. Lifestyles of health and sustainability. We sell Zen. We sell peace of mind. Right? You ever go to those Trader Joe's things and you look at Fiji water, like $5 for a bottle of, something that you can finish in 2 gulps? You ever see those commercials for Fiji water? Water, naturally crafted, never touched by human hands, type of thing, right? You're like, ooh, this is kind of neat. I'll pay $5 for that. I drank Fiji water. It tastes like tap water. And for all that we know, it could come right out of the faucet. But because you jack up the price and you sell it in a certain store, well, that's just a little bit different than just your normal bottle of Dasani, right? And how about the ever, growing cultural niches of vampires, goths, and emos? Right? You're all wearing black. You're all listening to some kind of depressing music. But please, please, please don't ever, ever, ever confuse a goth with an emo. They want you to know that they are completely different people. The gangster culture, the nerd culture, the anime culture. I mean, all of these things are products not only of pop culture, but of consumerism, right? Products of target marketing, brand new identities that are created. Congratulations, folks. You have just experienced print capitalism in a modern pop cultural sense. Here's a couple of examples that I do. And might I add, some of these photos and some of this discussion is taken from my globalization class. So another shameless plug for anyone interested in taking the winter session, the honor session, with me. Here is a jar of bone broth that I picked up. Well, I didn't buy it, but I picked this up at the local Wegmans, right? This is a great example of market segmentation. Okay? Bone broth is something that your grandparents would use, right? Your peasant grandparents would make. They want to make soup. They want to make chicken soup. They want to make some kind of soup when you're sick or it's cold outside, right? Your grandparents, or if you had parents that, came from still an agrarian heavy country, they would always be like, save the bones, save the gristle, save the cartilage, save all that stuff, right? And what do you end up doing? You soak it for a day or two in a pot of water, simply so the water collects all of the flavor, the juices, the little bits and pieces, right? Then you drain the water, you throw the bones out, and then you make soup with it. Well, for us, late Gen Xers, millennials, Zoomers who don't know how to do any of this stuff, because the boomer generation basically decided to forget all of that for the sake of TV dinners and, microwave, 30-minute meals, you can go to more developed supermarkets and buy bone broth. And they don't come cheap. We're talking like this jar, I think, was like $9. And the fact that even the label on the jar looks like it is something out of the 1920s, the 1910s, right? What is the jar selling? And why did I reach for this jar to photograph? It caught my eye. What it's also selling is authenticity. Right? And in this day and age, ladies and gentlemen, we are searching for something authentic. We're searching for something meaningful. We're searching for things that are not false, misleading, and BS ridden. So I reach for the bone broth. Look, 100% grass-fed beef. Beef jalapeno sea salt. You look at the ingredients. It's basically nothing but that. No preservatives, no chemicals, no nitrates, no, antibacterial additions to the thing. No high fructose corn syrup. This is old school stuff. So you open it, you got to use it immediately. Now, how many people have the money for this? Not that many. But if you're shopping already at a Wegmans, at a Trader Joe's, at a Whole Foods, you kind of have the money and you're sort of in the mood and you're in the thing to buy this. I know that in Whole Foods, they have half an aisle just devoted to coconut water, for God's sake. Right? And you didn't think that there were 8 million varieties of coconut water, but hey, the woke hipster makes that necessary. So this is a great example of target marketing, right? It is selling something that the customer will look at and say, authentic, right? Wholesome. You might even think about, I wish that I still lived on the farm. I still lived in a simpler time. Well, we might not be able to do that, but we can cook with bone broth. All right, someone else does all the preparation work for you. Fantastic. Okay? Other examples of target marketing, right? The Christmas season, which begins in some stores as early as mid-September. Right? Mid-September. This was a picture that I took of a Christmas display in Fortune Off, the store that used to be around a lot more than they are now. This was taken. I took this picture back in 2004. This was the first week of October, if I'm not mistaken. Right? And selling the whole Christmas season, the greenery, the lights, the holly wreaths, the train sets. You look at it and you think, I would love to have that in my house, right? And why? Because it gives you a sense of keeping with traditions that you may or may not have even had here. How about Chick-fil-A? Something completely on the opposite side. Chick-fil-A today is one of the most successful fast food places. This Chick-fil-A in Woodbridge Center, which is close to where I live, has been around since the 1970s. Somehow this is like one of those like the first Chick-fil-A's ever, and they've never closed. But if you know anything about Chick-fil-A, right, the people who run it tend to be a bit more on the politically and socially conservative side. Not exactly the most gay-friendly. They close on Sundays, right? They believe in wholesome family values. And yeah, that does get some people upset. Oh my God, Chick-fil-A is homophobic chicken. I'm not eating there. What's funny is that when Chick-fil-A kind of came out a couple of years ago, and said, while we're not going to openly and actively campaign against same-sex marriage, we, the board of directors, we, the people who at Chick-fil-A believe in traditional families, right? That was it. That's all that they said, right? There was an enormous backlash on social media from people that are like, oh, Chick-fil-A is racist, they're homophobic, I'm never eating there again. Interestingly enough, as soon as that happened, a number of other people that were like, oh, it pisses off the libs, oh, it pisses off the, the gay brigade. You know what? I wasn't even thinking of having a Chick-fil-A today, but I'm going to go there and see what it's all about, just to own the libs. And I'll be honest with you, all right, I'm old enough to eat it, say what you want about me. It's damn good chicken, right? Chick-fil-A is good, all right? It's good. The people who work behind the counter are polite. They give you a lot of sauce. And in the bathrooms, there's complimentary mouthwash. So, you know what? If this is the price to pay to enjoy homophobic chicken, guess what? Chick-fil-A is not going anywhere anytime soon. In fact, their stores are now opening all over the place. At one point, I was convinced there was only 2 Chick-fil-A's in the entire world. Now, they're basically running in competition with KFC and Popeyes. Okay? How about other stores, right? If you just go to the mall, right, and you walk past a lot of these stores, I'm sure some of you know of these places, right? Do stores sell a certain style, a certain fashion that is going to attract and promote, to attract some people over others, right? Abercrombie and Fitch is certainly one that caters to, let's say, the preppy, the white, upper class, douchey college student or whatever it is, right? And by the way, if you're a fan of Abercrombie and Fitch, no offense, right? I mean, their clothes do look nice, right? But it's the type of clientele that they will cater to, including the smaller Abercrombie store, which was across the way that, you can see in the doorway here has a picture of nice, smiling, happy white people, okay? What about Banana Republic, right? I'm sure that you can think of stores in your area, right, that already kind of promote and sell a narrative, sell through symbols a certain identity, right? J. Crew, right? Same type of thing. Or what's this one? What is this? Is this Pacific Sun or whatever? I keep forgetting the name of the store. Oh, Hollister. I'm sorry, Hollister. I took a picture of this again, back in 2004, this was at my local mall, and I initially thought this was a sushi place. I thought this was a Japanese restaurant because of the, pagoda thing here, right? And I walk in, and I just hear this, deafening, beatbox. It sounds like I walked into Webster Hall or something like that. There's very little, minimal lighting, and I felt kind of intimidated, almost like I'm too old for the club. But Hollister, from what I gathered, is a clothing line that sells California culture, that sells West Coast culture to East Coast clients. And I remember being told this the first year I taught globalization by a student who was from LA. And she, was here in New Jersey and basically said, nobody in California shops at Hollister. But that's okay, because Hollister aims to sell a constructed lifestyle to people in New York, New England, Florida, the Carolinas, right? And, well, here it is sort of in New Jersey. Claire's, as hard as I tried to convince myself, there was really nothing in this store that I could use myself. So I kind of felt like I was discriminated against as a customer, but I didn't want to bring anything bad up to the manager because, there's other people that were in the store having a good time here. Rave girl. You want to talk about ghetto glam. Here's one that kind of promotes the the streetwalker in all of us, right? Perfectly appropriate for that night shift job that you need. And it sells more of a ghetto glam. Here's, drama queen right over here. Very, very different from Abercrombie, from J. Crew. It caters to a different, what they perceive to be socioeconomic class. A certain regional lifestyle as well. It doesn't have to necessarily be the projects or the ghettos. It can also be some of the lower income suburbs around the areas where I live. Spencer is one of those stores that basically tries to sell every aspect about weed culture except the weed itself. They'll sell the pipes, they'll sell the grinders, they'll sell the ashtrays, they'll sell the t-shirts, they'll sell all the things that you need to decorate your college room. It is really catered towards, people in their teens and, I would say maybe early 20s. Not something that you would want to decorate when you first buy your, when you buy your first house and are trying to impress the neighbors with. That's when you go to the Apple store, right? And of course, the Apple store is so common that you don't even need a name for it. You just have the logo. You recognize this, and you go, oh, Apple, Macintosh, right? Not PCs. You know exactly what this is. This is a recognizable symbol. And not only that, the store is, awash in pastel colors, smooth edges. It looks like the bridge of the Starship Enterprise, And, I've gone in there a couple of times to, either upgrade my iPod or fix something. And, of course, the first question that they ask is, what version of your Mac are you using? And I say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not using a Mac, I'm using a PC. And you can kind of tell that they throw up a little bit in their mouth when they see that, like, oh, you're one of those people. I'm like, yeah, can you fix my iPod? And you're like, yeah, okay. But it's a type of store that sells something a bit more sophisticated. PC, Mac, PC stuff, Microsoft stuff, that's your dad's computer, right? And I guess I'm now in that dad mode, but the younger people, they have Macs, right? That's just what we use. Brookstone, I don't know if you know about these, but Brookstone is one of those stores that sell expensive gadgets that if you had the money and you had the space for, you would totally buy. Right? Air filters, massaging chairs, all sorts of overly expensive, hyped up products for your kitchen. But again, it's a type of market niche that it's above, let's say, Bed Bath & Beyond. It's above IKEA. Right? Bed Bath & Beyond and IKEA and Walmart, you go for your basic stuff. Brookstone, you go for your more high-end stuff. Brookstone is when you've moved out of the apartment and you're able to buy a house, and a house in a good suburb. So you need to kind of keep up appearances here. This is a store that did not last long in my mall, Turkish Accents, just because I think it was too niche, and there's not that many people are going to be walking in the middle of suburban Edison, asking for a hookah hose or a lamp or some tchotchke furniture or whatever it is, right? But obviously, those that are interested in the type of Middle Eastern, Mediterranean aspect of it all, sure. I mean, it had its moment, but it didn't last long. This caught my attention, and this is an old photo, folks. You can tell because guess what? I'm not even talking about the stand-up of Luke Skywalker. I'm talking about the Luke Skywalker stand-up was in front of, you ready for this, an actual music store, a Sam Goody. I don't know if some of you might remember Sam Goody's, or I think there might be a Tower Records, one or here and around New York or whatever it is, right? But back in my day, before there were MP3s, we had this thing called compact discs, and we would play them in our Walkmans, and we had a rollicking good time, right? I mean, I'm showing how old I am here, but music stores. Look at these cell phones. Look at how old this stuff is. You can tell these are period photos that I'm showing. I'm getting all nostalgic here, right? But why did I take this photo? I took the photo because, well, Luke Skywalker caught my attention. Now, I don't know if everything in the store is 25% off. I don't know if Luke Skywalker is 25% off, but it caught my attention. Why? Because it caters to additional elements of pop culture identity. This is a symbol, and it's a narrative for me. It's Luke Skywalker. It's Star Wars. My favorite movie. I could do the dialogue from start to finish, right here, right now. Old trilogy, Star Wars, Empire, Jedi, you name it. Forget the prequels. Definitely forget the sequels. I do like The Mandalorian. Clone Wars is pretty good. I'm glad they brought back Grand Admiral Thrawn. And there are about 2 of you right now that are nodding your head going, absolutely. And I guarantee you there's another 5 of you that are like, I have no idea what Rossi is talking about right now. He totally, totally lost me. Okay? That's, again, culture and language. Culture, language, and meaning. You think this stuff just exists in the late 19th, early 20th century? Absolutely not. Pop culture, market segmentation, political segmentation is alive and well, is one of the best parts about the organic nature of culture. Speaking of which, Hot Topic, right? Here's a store that sells to the goths, emos, and vampires, right? And the people who go there know what the difference is between them. I also have noticed that Hot Topic will love to cater to 1980s culture, knowing full well that the oldest people that shop there were born in the 90s. All right, so it's a type of nostalgia for something that existed before you were even born. All right, so there'll be T-shirts with, little video game characters from the old 8-bit and 16-bit Nintendo era, which at this point is like, I'm talking to all of you, that's your parents' generation at that point, right? But again, Hot Topic, it does sell clothes. I wouldn't necessarily just shop at Hot Topic because I need a pair of pants, right? You shop there because you need some kind of fashion. You're going to a Halloween a Halloween party, or you're some kind of, I don't know, gothic emo metalhead BDSM, fan or whatever it is, right? You can buy clothes, but I wouldn't recommend wearing those clothes to your first business, interview. Then, of course, there is the, symbol of, well, probably one of the oldest ways of getting people's attention, and that is selling sex. Just in case you were wondering, this is an advertisement for sneakers, Skechers. Now, I've owned Skechers in my life, and, I'm comfortable in saying that my life has never been as interesting as this strapping young lad. I have worn, Skechers, but I never had a day where this resulted as a result of me wearing those sneakers. But it gets your attention. It sells. It is catered to a particular target audience. Again, symbol, narrative, receptivity. All the things that we have been talking about, right, for weeks on end. And then I had to do this one. There is a store that sells hot maternity clothes. I don't know if they're still around, but it's just like, back in the day, being pregnant was, wholesome, family, time for you to put the adult clothes away and start preparing to be a mother. Not anymore. You want to look hot while you're still pregnant? Hey, this shirt, baby, is now actually, it's speaking the empirical truth. Just put an arrow down here. Yes, So why think that your youthfulness, your independence is over when you're about to, become a mother? No, you can totally cater into that that crowd as well. So with this, photo, with this photo journey of life in a shopping mall in New Jersey, right? We begin to see what market segmentation is. And I hope that this is something that is, familiar to you, but you just haven't had a chance to put a name to it, right? So what does market segmentation do? What's the whole purpose of this? Well, as I've already said, it creates a new commercial culture that reifies and exaggerates social differences in fashion, taste, and style, all in the name of profits. Market segmentation really began in the 1960s with the first generation of baby boomers, right? The boomer crowd, the ones that we kind of look at today as, the source of everything wrong and unwholesome in the world. The reason why we can't have nice things is because the boomers are voting for the wrong people. We have to remind them that when they were teeny boppers, right, they were, the wave of the future. And all of these things were marketed towards them because it was consumerism begins to really blossom in the 60s. right? You don't want to wear the same clothing. You don't want to have the same lifestyle as your Depression-era parents, right? You want something new, something innovative, something radical, something completely dynamic. And it has existed uninterrupted, really ever since. And because market segmentation does provide a sense of choice, as I've already said, within those choices, we find rather homogenized societies, right? Societies that are kind of grouped into prefabricated categories of fashion, taste, and style. Folks, this is nothing different from collective memory, right? Collective memory, if we go back to the larger picture and we accept that there can be multiple collective memories in a society, especially if we demarcate them by region, by age, by political proclivity, then yes, there is diversity within a society. But because collective memory is selective, it's institutionalized, and it is, guarded into believing certain things over others, it stands to reason that collective memory, while highly interpretive of past events, is in and of itself very homogenizing, right? One collective memory, and remember, we will defend myths over historical fact. Even when we are presented with historical evidence, most people say, no, that's fake news. No, I want to believe what I want to believe. Market segmentation is no different. In fact, I don't want to say it's a synonym for collective memory, but market segmentation is kind of like collective memory for consumerism, right? It creates different identities, but within those identities, it is very conforming and very unifying, especially when market segmentation facilitates the need of something from peer pressure. It creates a certain desire in individuals to want to be part of one group or another. So for whatever reason you want to identify as, I don't know, let me think here. You want to identify as a nerd. I don't know, I'll just pick one, right? Then you have to, right? You have to wear certain clothes. You have to wear certain accessories. You have to not wear other things. You have to follow certain humor and watch certain shows and tell certain jokes, right? You want to be like that nerd culture, all right? You have to voluntarily wear glasses. And you have to go out of your way to wear the big rimmed glasses, which again, I'm old enough to remember. Guys, girls, I wore big rimmed glasses back when I was in elementary and middle school, and that got me ostracized. It was, people. Oh, here's a good one. You know that movie Napoleon Dynamite? This might be a bit old for some of you now, but if you've seen, Napoleon Dynamite, when it came out, people were like, oh, that's so funny. Oh, this nerd culture is so great. And some of the older people, Gen Xers like myself, I'm like, I don't find anything funny about Napoleon Dynamite because that's just triggering a lot of unpleasant memories, with me. So it's just okay, but now you get to wear big rim glasses, which was considered to be socially awkward and dorky back in the day. So you have to want to be part of something which, like culture in the broader sense, right? It attracts certain people to conform to certain identities and behaviors and values to the point where, within a collective memory, things that have happened in the past that you have no connection to, you're going to be emotionally attached to, right? The Egyptians look at the pyramids, that's ours. The Greeks look at Hagia Sophia, that's ours. The Turks look at Hagia Sophia, no, that's ours, right? In that sense, right, the same type of need from peer pressure is part of the whole thing. Now, what makes market segmentation somewhat distinct from the more broad-ended elements of collective and historical memory? Market segmentation, because it is associated with the market, with consumerism, is also associated with neoliberalism. And neoliberalism is that overarching theory that, if anything, has come to define, I would say, the last 40 to 45 years of American political culture. I've mentioned it a couple of times in this class, and you may have heard it, in passing in conversations here or there. But what exactly is neoliberalism? And I'm drawing specifically from the writings of Henry Giraud, particularly in his work, Youth in a Suspect Society. Neoliberalism, if nothing else, is the understanding of free market fundamentalism. Right? Free market fundamentalism in which social problems become privatized and removed from public debate. Right? In other words, right, the market will solve all major problems: political, social, ideological, economic, cultural. Throw money at it. Gentrify the area. Put in a Whole Foods. Build a UA cinema. Throw in a skate park. Add a microbrewery to this dilapidated, rundown factory here, right? And that will solve all of people's problems. It is the understanding that principles of communal responsibility, that social capital stuff, are now replaced with an emphasis on individual happiness. Happiness that is measured and defined through the acquisition of public goods. And the acquisition could be something as simple as, buying a jar of bone broth to make you feel like, ooh, I'm going to eat something really healthy, wholesome, and woke the next day. To all the way to, hey, I need a place to live. I can live in a smaller and more affordable apartment in the middle of nowhere, or I can brag about getting a corner apartment in Brooklyn. I may have to share that apartment with 3 other people, but I live in Brooklyn. I live in the right areas of Brooklyn. I live right in Brooklyn Heights. I live in Bushwick. I live in Williamsburg. I live in Greenpoint, as opposed to saying I live in Fort Hamilton, or I live in Crown Heights, or East New York. Or areas like that, right? I live in Long Island City, which is actually kind of funny because 20 years ago, anybody who said they lived in Long Island City, I meant, okay, you're poor working class. Today, Long Island City, very different from what I remember it as. And that's very different from saying I live in Glendale or I live in Maspeth. No one wants to brag about living in Maspeth, right? So the point here is that neoliberalism adds value to individual degrees of accomplishment. But these elements of accomplishment usually come through purchases, through individual purchases. This even can be, seen in your choice of where you go to school, what you drive, what job you have, right? There's a difference between saying, I work in a toll booth versus, I work in a toll booth, or I work for MTA versus I work on Wall Street, right? Now, you can work on Wall Street and hate your job, be forced to work 70 to 80 hours a week, and look like you're 60 before you turn 30. Or you can work for the MTA, or you can work in a toll booth, or you can work something else, get great union benefits, and, retire in 20 years and live well. Okay? But it's not a status-oriented job. So neoliberalism is this understanding, this cultural understanding, right, that the free market alone, sorry for the typo once again, the free market alone should provide for the welfare of society amid the withdrawal of state intervention in place of corporate sovereignty. So let Amazon, let Walmart, let Elon Musk, let Tesla, let Microsoft, let Coca-Cola, Nestle, Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, Wegmans, let a corporate marketing interested business park solve your problems. Let them give you a rewarding job, maybe, kind of, sort of, I don't know. Let a private real estate company move into an area and transform an otherwise workable but out-of-date building into luxury apartments that only the right people can and should afford. Okay, take a look at the areas around LIU. Take a look at Ashland Ave. Take a look at those big skyscrapers across the street on Flatbush. And you begin to see, right? You begin to see again the type of clientele that neoliberalism attracts and indirectly pushes away. Neoliberalism is also reminiscent of identity and values through custom-designed market solutions and segmentation. So market segmentation is very, very much a part of neoliberalism, right? Because it caters to the individual. I should say it caters to the individual's sense of individualism. But like neoliberalism, it is very conforming. It makes you want to aspire towards certain lifestyles But in order to do that, you have to give up a lot of your independent decision making. You have to basically conform to a whole bunch of other structural conditions around you if you want that end goal. You want to have that studio apartment, that artist loft studio apartment in Dumbo, so you could say you live in Dumbo, so you could take the selfie on Instagram and impress everybody that, ooh, you must be doing really good to be living in Dumbo. You have to end up getting certain jobs that pay a certain amount of money. And that usually requires you to give up a lot of your creativity. You're going to be working in a financial company. You're going to be working for corporate. You'll probably be a cog in the wheel. And you know this, but guess what? Your reward for being an exploited worker Monday through Friday is I get to take a selfie on Washington Street in front of the Manhattan Bridge. Look at how awesome I am. I get to point to this apartment and say, oh, look, it overlooks Manhattan, despite the fact that your apartment building shakes every time the B or the D goes over the Manhattan Bridge, which is one of the things I always loved when I was traveling to work, when I was taking the train. I'm like, yeah, I'm ruining someone's morning once again, because that Q, that B, that D really makes a lot of noise on the Manhattan Bridge. Now, what about political segmentation? Right? What does political segmentation have in common, and how is it a little different from ideas of market segmentation? Political segmentation is the application of mass marketing techniques to the political arena. Just that simple, right? Nothing really all that different. In the same way that market segmentation sells an identity, sells a behavior, a lifestyle, an image to the public, this is no different in politics, right? Selling a candidate's lifestyle, selling a candidate's fashion, image, sound bites, in the same way a business sells a product. The entire 2020 election was largely, if not entirely, shaped around political segmentation, especially after, right, Biden, was given the nomination by the Democratic Party. We know that Biden doesn't have any policies of his own, so they are trying to sell him as some hip, cool, uncle, some hip, awesome old man, despite the fact that prior to Biden, and when it looked like, Warren or Harris or Klobuchar or others were, in the mix, right? There were people saying, well, we don't want old white men, running. We need new, younger women running the show. Well, that statement was largely targeted against Bernie Sanders, right? We don't want an old white guy with ideas. When Biden suddenly becomes the person, oh, it's great. We're selling him like a box top. We're selling him like a new car. We're creating an image around him that doesn't even exist. And then when we add Kamala Harris to the whole process, I mean, yes, both of them are, people who profit off of the surveillance states. But Kamala is female, and she's a person of color, and she's sassy, and she doesn't take no gumption from Mike Pence, and she wears Converse sneakers. Forget the fact that she ascended the political ladder by exploiting a number of penal codes to incarcerate a whole bunch of poor people in California. That just made her someone that looked like she's going to defend the status quo. And once she's nominated for a VP, well, she's just Yas Queen, right? She's the new queen, in place of Hillary Clinton. This is nothing new, folks. All right, American politics has been selling politicians as early as Dwight Eisenhower. Right? President and former Supreme Allied Commander of World War II. Eisenhower decides to run for president, and it's a landslide victory. Why? Because it's Dwight Eisenhower, the man who effectively won the war in Europe. Right? You're going to run against Dwight Eisenhower, the man who saved Europe from the Nazis? And this is the narrative. This is the symbol of Eisenhower that is being promoted. And, he wins and gets reelected for a second term. Eisenhower's great. Was he an effective president? Not really. He was kind of mediocre, but no one says anything bad about it because it's Dwight Eisenhower, right? And it's actually during that election season when the lesser known and far less charismatic Adlai Stevenson, right, it loses, where he sort of opines the idea that you can merchandise candidates for high office like breakfast cereal, that you can gather votes like box tops is, I think, the ultimate indignity to the democratic process. He might be right, but guess what? We've been doing that for decades, right? We sold JFK over Nixon, right? And the big thing is, if you tuned in to the Kennedy-Nixon debates, depending upon how you heard it, you walked away with a different opinion of who won the election or who won the debates. If you listen to the Kennedy-Nixon debates on the radio, you come away thinking Nixon won, right? Nixon had all of the facts, the answers. Kennedy was big platitudes, We can make America great because America allows us to make it great. Something like that, something insipidly vapid. But if you watched it on TV, you walked away thinking, oh my God, Kennedy is total presidential material, right? Nixon looked horrible that day. He was angry. He was sweating under the cameras. His skin reacted against some of the makeup that they put on him for the camera lights. So he looked like hell. He looked like he was nursing a horrible hangover. Whereas Kennedy just looked, hot and sexy. And if you think that that's all that's needed, people were saying, oh, Biden is great. Biden just looks presidential. He just comes off as presidential. I mean, okay. There's lots of people that I know that look good and can be presidential, but I'll tell you, they're complete assholes. It's just like, but that's what wins, right? Obama won because he was smooth and debonair. And Trump won because he was charismatic. And he was one of those people that presented this idea of a millionaire who could still drink working class beer at a dive bar, right? Hillary comes across as arrogant, smug, elitist, condescending, and, absolutely convinced that the presidency is hers and she has to waste her time mingling with the plebeians, right? Now, maybe that's not how she felt, but that's exactly the image that she projected. And look, since the 80s and 90s, right, we're moving into really the discussion of our readings, right? Memory, specifically collective memory, has branded and retold the presidencies of Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton multiple times, to the point where memories of Reagan, memories of Clinton, have very little in common with the actual policies and the actual decisions that were made. So if you read the Buchanan speech that was assigned, and you remember Buchanan basically saying how fantastic Ronald Reagan's presidency was, and this is in '92, mind you. So, this is only 4 years ago. Reagan was already deified as this modern-day conservative god. But what's interesting about this is that the conservatism of Pat Buchanan, who's still alive today, one of the few paleo-conservatives left, is very different from the ideology of Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was quite liberal. Buchanan is hardcore conservative, social conservative, ethical conservative, you name it. The man, if you read his thing, is still today is against gay marriage, against abortion, the environment, fuck the environment, we need profits, we need jobs, that kind of thing, right? But the deification of Ronald Reagan is the same way that George Washington and Abraham Lincoln have been refurbished, reimagined for modern day consumption. And the same thing went for a while with Bill Clinton. Okay? Although I have to say that it's less Bill Clinton today and more Barack Obama. Clinton is kind of damaged goods, right? Clinton is old. He's got a few sex scandals that are associated with him. His name is too close to Jeffrey Epstein. Obama, right? One of the reasons why Biden was favored is because, we can't get Barry in for a third term, but we can get his VP in, right? And the memory of Obama, of Michelle, especially when you juxtapose them with the, dysfunctional family that is the Trumps, the Obamas are squeaky clean. They're the perfect couple. Not only that, they're younger, they're black, they're hip, they're stylish, they're sexy in that sense, right? Forget the fact that Obama deported more immigrants than Trump ever did. Forget the fact that Obama ordered drone strikes, the likes of which no one else before him ever did. Forget the fact that Obama gaslighted the people of Flint, Michigan into thinking that the poisoned water was okay to drink and that they're, deluding themselves, right? Forget the fact that Obama, intervened and sabotaged a whole bunch of campaigns earlier this year in order to elevate Biden to the front. No, we're not going to forget that. Oprah loves Obama, right? Alyssa Milano loves Obama. MSNBC fawns over Obama. And that's the narrative. And that's the myth, right? And so we end up looking in this day and age with a number of competing political myths. This is what makes my country so fascinating and so mind-numbingly annoying as well, is that we argue over political semantics by using myths as opposed to facts, right? Do not besmirch the integrity of Obama, or you're a dirty white supremacist or a hardcore Russian troll, right? So when we talk about political segmentation, we have to acknowledge that just like with market segmentation, political identities are created and they are constantly reinforced, being centered around values and beliefs specifically fitted for personal consumption and competition. So when we talk about politics today, and we use terms like liberals and conservatives and more derogatory terms like libtards and cucks, alt-right, Antifa, the left, social justice warriors, right? They all carry a number of connotations depending on the group, right? So liberals and conservatives is kind of the most basic divide between, let's say, left and right. But within liberals, right, liberals themselves will differentiate between them and the more left, right? Because liberals are a big fan of free market fundamentalism. They're a fan of globalization. They're a fan of gentrification. They're the type of people, what I like to call the tote bag carrying liberals, right? The tenured faculty that votes Warren because they have the money. They've got the affluent neighborhood. They're doing fine for themselves. They believe in woke politics. The left, on the other hand, are those that are more interested in substantive social welfare improvements, universal health care, Green New Deal, at least $15 minimum wage, if not higher, the unionization of the working class. Liberals don't want that, right? Liberals are like, this is going to ruin my stock portfolio. Conservatives are not that different from liberals, except they just tend to be a bit more patriotic. Right? They're less gay-friendly and more, red, white, and blue-friendly. They're more like, they're back the blue. Liberals are the ones that are going to have BLM bumper stickers on their Priuses. Conservatives are going to have back the blue, okay? Alt-right tends to be even more right-wing. It's kind of like your new modern-day political reactionary, but one that is not interested in compromise and not interested in working within the moral basis of current law. The alt-right are those that, are going to show up and defend, Confederate statues with tiki torches and, call for the preservation of white culture and white society. Antifa are those that have very little to lose in life. Those are the ones that will show up with, firecrackers and dynamite and smoke bombs and will immediately attack the neo-Nazis, will smash windows of banks and corporations, will take on the police in realization that the system itself is institutionally racist and designed against a large amount of people in this country, people of color, the downtrodden, the lower income classes, and what have you. Social justice warriors tends to be a derogatory term that we all use to people who, do little more than just simply use their social media platforms, their Facebook, their Instagram, their Twitters, to tell people every day, quote, hashtag wear a mask, hashtag BLM, hashtag me too type of thing, right? But they don't actually do anything. Right? And that's kind of the thing with neoliberalism. Neoliberalism drives a lot of these movements, particularly liberals, conservatives, social justice warriors, right? It is very individualizing. And this is kind of one of the things that people notice about neoliberalism, particularly in identity politics, in that there's a big emphasis on image and meaning over any real substance and debate. So there's a lot of virtue signaling, there's a lot of performance that's being done. Nancy Pelosi is a great example of a performance politician who will say certain things in front of the camera or tear up Trump's speech, but then go and vote for all the Republican-nominated judges behind everybody's back. So the thing about neoliberalism is that, yes, it's self-gratifying, but it doesn't actually get to the underlying issues plaguing societies, right? So you can throw, a Trader Joe's at a blighted neighborhood, and yeah, it's going to attract a whole bunch of people named Mackenzie and Campbell, but it's going to also push away the people who used to live in those neighborhoods who now can't afford to shop there, who can't afford to live there. So like market segmentation, right, this type of brand loyalty to mottos, slogans, and charismatic politicians is about as far as political segmentation will go, which is why politicians and political elites like Sanders or AOC or Rashida Tlaib or Jamal Bowman or others are seen as very dangerous, because they're the ones that will actually do more than talk the talk. They'll go into blighted neighborhoods, they'll go into disenfranchised communities and talk about empowering them. And that's a threat to the status quo. If the status quo is all about image over substance, well, then it's not a surprise that someone like Biden was promoted for the presidency, because he's very good at thinking that he's in charge when he's really just a figurehead that is going to protect Wall Street, the corporate media, and the 1%, just without the overt racism like Trump. Because, look, political segmentation and the culture wars that we're talking about, if you read Nagel, sort of shows that we're really just engaged in shouting matches of identity. It's really no longer about any particular issues. Analyses, particularly news today, is simplified almost to the point of being dumbed down. Because we don't want people to be informed, we want them to be entertained, right? So MSNBC and Fox are two sides of the same coin. They're going to give you information, but they're going to deliver it in such a way that it virtuifies their own constituents while demonizing the others. So like once a week, I'm at my parents' place. And yeah, they're old enough. They got the Fox News on. And look, I used to watch Fox. I used to be very right-wing. I used to be Republican. I used to be all that kind of stuff, right? And then I just kind of moved more and more to the left, right? But I know how the right thinks. I know how the Fox News audience thinks. And listening to the narratives that are being projected on Fox, and, Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, Lou Dobbs, Jeanine Pirro, all these things. I mean, some of them border on paranoid hate speech, but others are very, very, very good at providing a narrative and getting the collective memory audience to completely agree with that myth, with that narrative, right? Because one's enemies can no longer be understood. They need to be demonized. In the same way that MSNBC wants you to believe that every Trump voter is a knuckle-dragging white supremacist. Forget the fact that many Trump voters did so and voted for him on economic reasons. And this time around in 2020, Trump got an increase, a noted increase in both the African American and the Latino vote. The votes that got Biden elected were suburban-dwelling white people. Trump actually got a major increase in the minority vote, meaning that Democrats can no longer assume that people of color will just naturally vote for Biden, especially after that idiotic gaffe that he made a couple of months ago. Remember where Biden said something like, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black, type of thing. And he said, you ain't black, to a black person, right? So the condescendingness is just unbelievable. Well, this is actually made to be like, look, politics is an either or, us versus them phenomenon. right? Very similar to the way in which collective memories are. We do everything virtuous. They do everything wrong. They have no reason to be taken seriously. We need to combat them at every and all corners. And this is done through the use of sensationalist claims and fear-mongering tactics, especially when rhetoric and communication are now being done through the internet. Right? The whole chapter that Angela Nagel offers us gives us an insight into the increased radicalization of collective thought. Now, I only assigned one chapter, and that looked at right-wing stuff, right? The politics and the rhetoric of people like Milo Yiannopoulos, Mike Cernovich, Richard Spencer, Alex Jones, the new generation of like irreverent nihilists in 4chan, 8chan, Reddit, and others. But there's an equally insulated and collectively incestuous community on the woke liberal side in Tumblr, okay? And you deviate from the, standard narratives, you're seen as an outsider. I've been called a Russian troll God knows how many times by people on the liberal left, whatever, when I'm trying to say, look, it's more than just, hashtag activism, but we need to, effectively engage in mobilizing the working class. We need to go into Appalachia and, get these white working class people to start voting progressive. Like, nope, they're racists. They don't care about LGBT rights. And my response is, why should they? What is it to them? Will someone please think of the, of the overrepresented 5%? They care about their own local needs. They care about their own local economic woes. Okay? So what if they're not woke? They can be a vital voting base for a progressive movement. Nope, we don't want them, right? We don't want them at all. Okay? And, that's kind of why, when I asked you before the election, a lot of you, now mind you, a good number of you were not political scientists, but you're all kind of deflated. You're all like, it's not going to make a difference. And I've had a number of conversations with you one-on-one, and a few of you have told me emphatically, I don't care about politics. That's why I'm a biologist. That's why I'm in the health sciences. And, when I ask why, your answer is pretty honest, because there's nothing for you to identify with. Because it's all, in your opinion, probably just BS. When politicians are treated as celebrities, and when we have nothing else, we will nominate celebrities as politicians. There was a serious movement back in 2018 to get Oprah to run for president in 2020. There was a serious movement to get Michelle Obama. What's her credentials? What's Oprah's credentials? What about, on the right, they want Ivanka Trump to run for president. Why? What are her credentials? Right? Just because they look good? Because they're your celebrity, mascot? What's their qualifications? Again, it doesn't matter, right? It's all about making certain that my side wins and your side loses. And this is all done through the corralling of would-be voters into prefabricated political groups. Okay? The Biden group, the Sanders group, the Warren group, the Buttigieg group, the Trump group. And yes, some groups can be, meshed into others. But, speaking from the progressive left, right, you do know that there was, and still is, a very large and vocal, what we call Bernie or bust movement. And that is, we're voting for Bernie Sanders, and if he doesn't get the nomination, I'm not voting for the Democrat appointee. I will stay home. I will write in my vote. I will vote green. I will, sort of do whatever. And I can sympathize with that. At the end of the day, I can tell you I wrote in Bernie for 2020. I'm from New Jersey. It doesn't really matter, right? But even there is the dangers of group homogenization that ends up doing more to justify your own incredibly niche-oriented beliefs than think about the larger picture. And this is not a blame on the Bernie or busters. This is across the board, right? The blue no matter who people, I now lovingly call blue MAGA, because they're basically no worse than your average typical Trump voter who really just votes over image as opposed to substance. So political segmentation, like market segmentation, treats everything like a tradable commodity. But this has fueled a major portion of political debate and the culture wars in the United States today, to the point where, identity-driven issues define the conservative right and the neoliberal center, right? Centers that are interested in maintaining either an economic or cultural status quo against the mobilization of new voter bases. The neoliberal center just wants you to believe that everything is going to go back to normal once we get Trump out of office, right? Forget the increasing political radicalization. Forget the impending climate apocalypse. Forget the prominence of an entirely new generation of Americans 35 years and younger that want nothing to do with mainstream politics. Forget it. Biden got elected. Happy days are here again. Let's go to brunch. That's all that matters. Let's go to brunch. America is back. On the other side, the conservative right will be licking their wounds and looking to effectively take control of the House in 2022. You think they're going to learn their lesson? Absolutely not. Right? They are going to dig in their heels, and they are going to be absolutely convinced that a Biden presidency is even worse than Bernie Sanders. It is one step away from communism, from anarchy, from totalitarianism, from, luxury gay-oriented space communism or whatever it is, right? And they are going to redouble their efforts. I guarantee you. They're going to redouble their efforts to take control of the House and all likelihood nominate somebody in 2024 that is going to be even worse than Donald Trump. And in the meantime, those of us on the extremely peripheral new left can sit all we want in our beer halls, our coffee shops, and our public parks and talk about the lack of attention to environmentalism, to healthcare, to anti-gentrification, and know that unless there is a major systemic breakdown, worse than COVID, nothing is really going to happen. We may have a few Band-Aid remedies to address climate change under Biden, but it is nowhere near what needs to be done in order to reverse the amount of carbon emissions that we're all told will reach a point of no return in about a decade or so. So, yes, neoliberalism, right? The idea that it's fine for the global corporate wealthy to conquer and dismantle our democracy and oppress the working class as long as we get to keep abortion and gay marriage. You'd be surprised what you can get away with, folks, if all that you do is be like, yep, abortion is awesome and gay marriage totally woke. Other than that, we can get away with a whole bunch of other stuff because that is what identity politics is really designed for today. And identity politics has a long-standing position in American political culture. Now, identity politics is part of the larger so-called culture wars that began in the 1960s, particularly with the growing public sentiment against the Vietnam War, and along with that, right, the rise of the hippie culture, the nonconformist culture. Before the boomers became staunch Fox News watching Republicans, a good number of them effectively rebelled against the then status quo and said, no, we're not continuing this same idea of, American marching around the world to the beat of our own drum. And of course, this produced a backlash to that against people who saw them as insurgents, disloyal, people who were intoxicated with alcohol and drugs and promiscuous sex and, all sorts of, horrible, horrible maladies that would destroy the moral fiber of American identity. This type of backlash, this type of resistance to the liberal flowering in the 1960s sort of came back, in some kind of vogue mode in the 1980s under Ronald Reagan, which is the reason why paleo-conservatives like Pat Buchanan and Fox News and Trump and others just glorify Reagan. Right? Reagan, who may have reversed some of the social cultural values of the United States. Although Reagan was very much in favor of free market enterprise, a very liberal concept. But the idea of embracing traditional American values, right? What I like to call a reliance on the three F's: faith, family, and fatherland, right? Faith, family, and nation, whatever that is, right? Loyalty to your country, fealty to your leadership, and traditional, adherence to family is a type of restorative collective memory that's been used, I would say, throughout the 1990s and afterwards, especially when we have a Democrat in office. So this type of traditional American conservative restorative collective memory was very prominent during the Clinton years, came roaring back during the Obama period, which was even more of an affront against many of these individuals, and is seen as sort of like the last front in defending America from the so-called liberal left. Right, this very phantasmagoric, euphemistic collection of movements and people and intellectuals and external threats that are aiming to destroy a country that people fervently believe were founded on Christian moral values. Right, their promotion of individualism, bourgeois bohemianism, irreverent irony, secularism, radicalism, scientism. These are all things that are plaguing, the Norman Rockwellian middle America. And it's, up to people like Pat Buchanan and Mike Pence and Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio and Fox News and others to defend these wholesome values, defend an America that technically never really existed. Right? They're defending an idea. They're defending a myth that they want to keep going today because it largely is seen as an attack on, I don't want to say white supremacy, because that's a sort of a negative term today, but definitely white superiority. As the country is increasingly globalizing, heterogenizing. What's the word here? Becoming more diverse. That's a good way, right? Whites will very soon cease to be an absolute majority in this country. They will be a plurality, but there will be no majority race. I think the second largest will be Latinos, right? Hispanics. And the idea here is, if not to preserve white dominance, then we need to promote a set of traditional values that can be resonant among the Black and Latino communities, especially when it comes to certain traditional family values, social conservatism, adherence to your elders. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but it's very hierarchical and it is very controlling. Now, the 2016 election, as I have been saying throughout this lecture, was a major, major cataclysmic moment for American political culture as well as the American status quo. Very few people expected Donald Trump to win. Right? All of the indices had given Hillary a 90+% chance of winning. And when she lost, and she lost significantly in the Electoral College, there were just a whole bunch, it was like days where people were just trying to figure out what the hell had happened. And obviously the people that were, in favor of Trump saw this as a resounding victory against not just an impending Hillary presidency, but a rejection of the Obama era politics. And we can say that this was a long time coming. In fact, I'd even go so far as to say that we were reaching this watershed moment as early as maybe a decade beforehand, certainly after the 2008 economic crisis. But since 2016, we have been in what Antonio Gramsci, a early 20th century Italian anarchist, referred to as an interregnum. Right, an interregnum. According to Gramsci, it is a crisis in which the old is dying and the new cannot be born. In this interregnum, a great variety of morbid symptoms appear. This is what Nikolai Petro referred to, what we talked about a few weeks back, as cultural formlessness. Right? America has been largely living for the last 4 to 5 years, if not more, in an increasingly apparent environment of formlessness. That means, right, the taken for grantedness of culture, the status quo of collective political and cultural identity is no longer guaranteed. State-sponsored historical memories are becoming challenged, and they are losing the argument in favor of a number of up-and-coming rival collective memories. Beyond just simply Trump and the shock victory that produced, right? This interregnum is a time when people are constantly asking, what is truth in an era of fake news? And I love the term fake news because it is quite possibly the biggest institutional vocal rejection of what was previously considered unassailable and unvolatile, right? Fake news, which the idea is even beyond Trump saying fake news. It's the understanding that the information that we get from CNN, from the New York Times, from the Washington Post, from others, are really deliberately, sanitized for our protection. Right? The New York Times does not post on everything, and they have their own views and skews. Same thing with the Washington Post, with Newsweek, the Wall Street Journal. There is no clear, objective news source. I don't think there ever really was, but people are now increasingly seeing that as such. They are also seeing the institutions of American power in an age of hegemonic decline. Okay? When we talk about hegemonic decline, we note that the idea of neoliberalism was dealt a severe blow under Donald Trump. Not because Trump is anti-neoliberal. Far from it. He is very much in favor of commodifying anything possible to make money. But it is the understanding among a growing number of new Americans that capitalism does not solve every single issue. That for the first time in decades, and when I mean I'm talking about generations, Americans, young Americans, are talking about the importance of community development, about collective benefit, of social welfare policies, of workers' rights, of environmental protection. These are things, folks, I'm in my early 40s. Nobody talked about these things in the 80s or the 90s. People are talking about these things now. The rise of various populist movements on both the left and the right serve as the clearest challenge that we can see to this status quo that some people may think is going to rebound under Biden. And I'm here to tell you that most likely will not happen. Biden will not save the beleaguered status quo, not because he's incapable, but because increasing number of Americans today do not see that status quo as worth saving, as worth believing in anymore. Now, we can talk about all we want about the rise of progressive left-wing movements, DSA, socialists, neo-communists, anarchists, democratic socialists, social democrats, Bernie Sanders movements, and what have you. But the most vocal and the most organized actually comes from the right, right-wing movements. And this type of new conservatism that comes in goes beyond the classic family morals conservatism of Pat Buchanan and is more so now in favor of the Elon Musk conservative, the Milo Yiannopoulos conservative, the libertarian conservative, right? The self-gratifying, material-driven conservative, the one that will live affluently, not poorly, in a huge house with a Hummer. In fact, 2 Hummers, one for me and one for my partner, whatever it happens to be, right? But a conservatism that seeks to upend the type of woke, identity-driven politics of neoliberalism, right? The same thing that is, pursued by the left, an anti-nationalist left that does not believe in the narratives of American exceptionalism, does not believe in the idea that the United States has a moral right to shape the world and believes that the United States is one among many countries in the world that have influence but need increasingly to cooperate. This is coming from an audience, specifically millennials, who will be the first generation in recent memory that will not live better than their parents, whether their parents are older Gen Xers or whether the millennials are old enough to actually have boomer parents as well. They will not be able to live the same comfortable life. These are people who are straddled with student debt, medical debt, the idea of being forced to go to college to get a degree for something that will not get them a job or a good paying job. The idea that they cannot simply leave college debt-free and go into the workforce. They may have to take a couple of years of unpaid internships. They may have to settle for grad school, law school, getting a master's, more money that they have to eventually pay. Will they be able to afford a house? Will they be able to pay off all of their debts? Do they have the financial resources to survive being sick? And when something like COVID hits, and we realize how vulnerable a good chunk of the working class is, and we find out that more than half of Americans are literally living paycheck to paycheck, it is not surprising that younger generations of Americans who do not save because they cannot save because they have nothing to save, they have little to believe in these narratives of American exceptionalism, of American greatness, and are more so characterized by public cynicism and the loss of any kind of optimism in this new Gilded Age, when it's perfectly obvious that the poor are discriminated against. If you are rich, you can get whatever you want. You can get away with whatever you want. But if you're not part of that upper middle to upper class society, you are effectively living in the most rugged individualistic environment possible. And when you also know that other countries have better health care, better employment insurance, better environmental policies, you begin to think, why can't we have that here? Why shouldn't we have that here? And when our elected leaders tell us, no, we can't have that here because that's socialism, then people either A, become increasingly radicalized, or B, they just don't care. They turn off. They don't vote. They don't want nothing to do with politics. They want nothing to do with political discussion. They just want to live their life as simply and as safely as possible. And that is where the alt-right steps in. Because, folks, there is a general trend within a number of faltering, weakening democracies in that when the neoliberal center fails to provide for increasing new generations of voters, when people begin to realize that basic social necessities are too expensive or inaccessible to them, in the olden days, there would be the existence of left-wing workers' movements, populist movements, socialists, anarchists, whatever, that would fight for things like weekends off, dental insurance, unemployment insurance, seatbelts in cars. These things have all now been deregulated under neoliberalism for the purpose of free market fundamentalism. And within this situation, it is much more likely for anger at the status quo to gravitate towards right-wing movements. Right-wing movements will call for these provisions, but within the context of ethnocentrism and hyperbolic nationalism. That's the reason why you've got such a following for Trump, why adversary cultures that run the gamut from post-Christian irreverence to social Darwinism to people who honestly, truthfully believe the writings of Ayn Rand, right? The understanding that in this world, there's nothing to be happy about. There is nothing to live for, so we need to steal for oneself. Hence the popularity of people like Jordan Peterson, who believe weak men cannot be virtuous. Jordan Peterson, for all of his faults, and for all of his misunderstandings of culture, especially Marxism, draws an enormous amount of followers today because of his stance against the entrenched narratives of feminism and demasculization, right? Peterson is basically one of those people saying it's okay to be male. It's okay to assert your maleness, right? Not at the sense of, dominating women, but live your life the way that you were biologically designed to. Women are constantly being told, embrace concepts of womanhood, but individualized, sort of self-interested womanhood, which Peterson's doing the same thing. And it is a fantastic narrative for a huge number of incels. And I say that not derogatively. I say that for people who realize they can't make a family in this day and age, right? Then you can look at some of the more virulently exclusionary narratives like the neo-Nazism of Richard Spencer, who says, hey, in an age where, everyone's saying be black, be this, be that, be Hispanic, be gay, be trans, Spencer is saying be white. Why can't we have a White History Month? Why can't we have a White Pride Parade? And these things are said with the intention of getting a backlash. Like, oh my God, how can you say that? To which he'll respond by saying, why not? It's free speech. You can have your Black History Month. Why can't I have my White History Month? And once that argument becomes relativized, and once the comment sections fill up with people supporting that way of thinking, not only do you realize that there are some serious rivals within collective memory to the entrenched political discourse, but social media, collective agreement within these beliefs and practices, gives the individual the idea that they're not alone, gives people the idea that this is a new community that I can find common agreement with other people, right? The cultural radicalism that defined liberal politics of the 1960s, fused with the economic narcissism of the 1980s, has produced an unbelievably atomized, individualized society where people just cannot find anyone to identify with. And the thought of saying something innocently, not even insultingly, but being shot down by others and then being accused of being racist, ableist. I love that word, ableist, right? Ageist, sexist, misogynistic, transphobic, homophobic, whatever it is, right? There is this feeling among the alt-right that the United States is under assault from what's commonly called liberal fascism. And there needs to be some kind of resistance to these hardcore, uncompromising identity politics, which I will say are targeting even the left, not just the right, right? Hence we come up with the derogatory term Bernie bros, right? Which are, it's a euphemistic statement to say that if you support someone like Bernie Sanders, you're misogynistic, you hate women, you mansplain everything to, liberal feminists who don't know anything any better. And you begin to realize that you're on the defensive before you even get your point across. And then you think, well, you can't even talk to some of these people, right? Because social media has radicalized the ways in which people feel insulated against others. So, as we are rounding out this discussion, and I know that it's been a bit comparatively longer than others, and I know that this is the penultimate week before the semester ends, but I sincerely hope that you are listening into this. As a matter of fact, this is actually a really good time now, if you're still listening, to issue a little participation assignment. For those of you that have been with me this long, I'll tell you what, I will give you 2 separate assignments to do. The first one is to email me with what you understand market segmentation to be. And within that, explain how political segmentation is related, right? Just what you expect market segmentation to be. The second assignment, the second standalone assignment that can give you an additional participation point, is explain to me your understanding of the online culture wars. right? From what you've read, from what you've experienced, just give me a little reflection on yourself, your own experiences with it. You don't even have to, this isn't even a Bobo reading check. This is just, are you still listening this long? So 2 assignments, right? Give me a sense of what market segmentation is, and just give me a recap of your own thoughts on the readings and the discussion for this week. All right, let's wrap up, right? Let's wrap this stuff up here. What does that have to say about memory and identity in 2020, at the end of 2020, the eve of 2021? Well, really 4 things. First, state-sponsored historical memory has been under assault and has been largely unmoored since the 1990s. We have yet to replace it with anything else. I don't think we're going to. I do think that within this interregnum, there have been significant attempts at imposing restorative collective memory by the political right. This took place initially under Clinton, became a full career opportunity for many people under Obama, and I am fairly certain that it is going to come back with a vengeance within the first few years of a Biden-Harris administration. Will this ever take over the country? No. But what it will do is entrench a number of social groups to think and identify with a number of cultural myths that will forever resist acceptance of whatever status quo, whatever historical facts may actually exist out there. Hence the John McNaughtons that, paint those kitschy paintings. Hence the Fox Newses, the conservative talk radios, all the other podcasts and social media platforms that in some cases exist in parallel universes, right? That's where we are in 2020. The second thing to take away is the importance, whether you like it or not, of identity politics to political discourse. Okay? Image and narrative have taken over any discussion of substance and policy. This is largely the vocation of mainstream media, our modern-day print capitalists that want you to think a certain way about Trump and a different way about Biden. They want you to think a certain way about Obama and a different way about Bernie Sanders. They want you to absolutely love Kamala Harris, and they want you to absolutely demonize Melania Trump. Okay? There's no room for any nuance. Okay? The media, specifically, the mainstream centrist media, has a way of presenting a type of Amerocentric narrative to the world. And if individuals go against that narrative, the editors, the opinion pieces will fix that up. Okay? You'd be surprised, ladies and gentlemen, how often, if you look at CNN or MSNBC or New York Times now, when you see opinion pieces, you're going to look at these opinion pieces and say, "Oh, look at that. That's print capitalism. That's an attempt at historical memory." I saw an article, just glancing today in CNN, opinion piece. The opinion piece was why Joe Biden was the only person that could defeat Donald Trump. This is total retcon. A year ago, Biden would have been seen as the worst person to go against Trump. But because Biden already defeated him, it's easy to write this retroactively after the fact. Okay? And that is because the print capitalism of the internet totally benefits off of this democratization of information. Whereas previously, right, the print capitalists of old monopolized the printing press, monopolized who writes the dictionary, who controls the textbooks, who has the levers of power in boards of education. Today, that means nothing. Today, the internet turns all of us into print capitalists. All of us, right? Boards of education can tell you what to think and what to know, and they might even be correct. And certain people, certain parents who don't like the way in which their kids are being taught can say, well, the real truth is on the internet. The real truth is with Hillsdale College, Liberty University, Prager University, what Dinesh D'Souza says, right? And this is just liberal brainwashing. And you could tell them that they don't know what they're talking about until you're blue in the face. And they'll be like, you're a part of that liberal agenda to brainwash my children. Like, okay, well, guilty as charged. It's whatever it is. And so finally, if we are to kind of look at where we're going in the United States today and kind of link it back to any kind of social capital, as I said in the beginning of this lecture, well, we're not Putnam. I don't think we can be Putnam anymore. And we're not as apathetic and resigned to things as Sabetti. Honestly, I think that we are much more like Berman. We are really heading towards the Weimarization of politics, culture, and identity. Americans are throwing themselves into their social networks because it's so easy these days. Subscribing to YouTube channels, Instagram accounts, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook. It's very, very, very easy, and it costs people sometimes nothing to be part of a larger community that looks at things around the world, and specifically in the United States, and gives a certain interpretation of them, And all it takes is a charismatic speaker, sometimes some really catchy multimedia, and you've got yourself an audience. You've got yourself a willing audience. I'm not saying that it's brainwashing, but I'm just basically saying that in this day and age, if you wanted to be an anti-capitalist anarchist, you've got a lot of options at your disposal. Whereas 20 some odd years ago, you were kind of on your own. Today, you've got groups that will tell you everything you need to know about the coming doom of this country. And if you really, really, really want to believe that Joe Biden is the best thing that ever happened to this country since Abraham Lincoln, I'm sure there's a cursedly liberal Facebook page that will tell you that as well. So, you thought we were done with social capital when we moved over to memory and identity. Now the two are actually interlinked, right? The two are interlinked. So I don't know if that finishes our class by making you more aware of what's going on, more confused as ever, more depressed, maybe even more curious. But stay tuned. I don't want to say that this is the end, because for many of you, you are first year and sophomores. The discussion, the inquiry, and hopefully the interest can continue. And once again, if I can shamelessly advertise, I am offering continuations of this directly in 2 classes. In the spring semester, I am offering a class called Ethnic Politics. It's a Monday, Wednesday class where we will talk a lot, especially about the last few weeks of changing collective memories and challenges to the status quo. I am also offering, as many of you know, a 3-week online class this winter called Globalization. And this is directly geared for honor students, so I'm talking to the right people. It is a 3-week class that I will only use 3 weeks of material rather than truncating 15 weeks into a smaller segment. You do not need to purchase any books. All you need to do, if you are interested, is sign up for the class. The readings will be provided by me. We will meet twice a week online, and the rest of the time we will be in readings, discussions, small writing assignments. I think you're all really, really going to enjoy that. And in the more formal sense, I am offering a class within the International Relations program called, I believe, Intro to the UN or the United Nations Theory or something like that, right? Where we look at these issues on a more global institutional context. Now, all of you are more than qualified to continue working with me if you are interested in the electives. Even if you take non-honors classes, they will count as electives towards your major. And maybe even we can work in some kind of specialization within your existing field of interest. But if you found this class to be informative, interesting, if you look forward to it every week, don't think that that's the end. Stay tuned for more. I would love to work with you in the future in investigating a lot of these things. I know we went through a lot of the stuff fast in this class, and a lot of this stuff was relatively new to you all. but you all have done exceptionally well so far. And so that's why I say we never stop learning. We just take a break for Christmas and summer, and then pick up the following semester. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's kind of, well, at least concludes the online section of this class. We still have 2 sessions to meet in person. I still have some additional material to give you alongside of our writing workshop, but other than that, we are pretty much coming to an end. So please meet with me, reach out to me if you have any questions about the final paper, as I know that many of you have already done. And I will work with you over the next week or so to ensure that you get the best paper submitted next Wednesday. All right, so best of luck writing your papers, and I will see you all very, very soon on Zoom. Take care.